Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 964 of the Juicebox Podcast. We haven't done this in a while. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is with me and Jenny Smith, and it is another in the Defining Diabetes series. This episode brings the Defining Diabetes series to 50 episodes. This whole thing started years ago when I decided that I wanted to define each term that you would use daily with diabetes. The Defining Diabetes series began on episode 236 with bolus, and it's been going on for years. Today, we're going to be discussing insulin to carb ratio, or carb ratio. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. You can use my offer code JUICEBOX at checkout at CozyEarth.com to save 40% off of your entire order. And get a free year's supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first order at drinkag1.com/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Omnipod 5 and the Omnipod DASH. It's sponsored by Omnipod, but they have two different kinds of Omnipods. They got DASH and they got 5. You're like, oh, Scott, it seems like a lot, but it's not. You know where you can go to make sense of it all? Omnipod.com/juicebox. While you're there, you can learn all about the Omnipod 5, which is an algorithm-based insulin pump, or the Omnipod DASH, which doesn't have an algorithm, but is still tubeless and delightful. My daughter has been wearing an Omnipod every day since she was 4 years old, and she just turned 19 this week. Omnipod has been nothing but a friend in this journey, and I think you would really enjoy it. Head over to my link now to learn all about Omnipod. Scroll down, take a look around. You're going to see pictures, descriptions. Here's a little button, check my coverage, if you want to check your insurance coverage and get started. Or here's another button. I'd like a free trial of Omnipod. Ooh, take the pod for a test drive. But look for those purple buttons when you get there. Read all about Omnipod, but really here's what you need to know. It's a tubeless insulin pump. You can swim with it, bathe with it. Your activities will not get in the way, right? You're playing soccer, there's no tubing. You're walking through the kitchen, nothing to get caught on like a drawer or something like that. But man, not having to disconnect for bathing and swimming, it's a big deal. I don't think people think about it, but it's summertime right now, and it's just terrific. All those other tube pumps, you disconnect to get in the water, and how many times have you forgotten to put it back on? And then no insulin, high blood sugars, and all the rest. That's not going to happen with Omnipod because you don't have to take it off to be active. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Check out the algorithm-based pump that works with the Dexcom G6. That's called Omnipod 5, or you get the Omnipod DASH. Whether you want an algorithm or not, you're going to get the best damn insulin pump my daughter has ever used and that I've ever seen. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Jenny, we have not done one of these in quite some time, but I am being told by the powers that be, which means Isabel in the Facebook group, that we are lacking a Defining Diabetes episode for carb ratio, and she really thinks it's necessary.
Oh,
so
what did we miss? How did we miss that?
I don't know. I feel like it's my fault. I can tell you that much.
Well, we came up with the list and we sort of put them together in order together. So
I see what you're
both
saying.
Missed it.
Yes, it's also your fault. Perfect.
It's also my fault.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah. Well, I like that better. It makes me much more comfortable.
No one is perfect, Scott.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate this. So you're going to hear some people call it carb ratio. You're going to hear some people call it insulin to carb ratio. Right? There's no other names.
Insulin to carb ratio. ICR, IC, insulin to carb. They might do it reverse, carb to insulin. But yeah, insulin and carb as a ratio to cover food. Yes.
Jenny, there are people who love this podcast and love you. And I don't think you're even aware of this, but that I'm going to get you to say carb so many times is really going to delight them because of your accent. You don't even know that, do you?
Do I say it weird?
Oh, I mean, not to you. But I'm so excited about this. Yeah.
I didn't know that I said it interestingly comparative.
Interestingly, that's a lovely way to put it. You say, well, say it again.
Carb.
Yeah. I think it happens more in a sentence. You kind of go carb. It's like that. It's interesting.
Do I?
Yeah. It's fantastic.
It kind of goes along with the Midwest O.
Yes. Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah. But trust me, this is going to tickle people. I'm going to get notes about this. Here's what the note will say. Thank you for having Jenny say carb.
That's really funny. I guess I didn't realize people enjoyed the way that I speak.
I probably didn't tell you when that happens, but I'll start sending those notes to you.
Oh, that would be lovely.
So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I never do this, but I'm going to go to Integrated Diabetes Services, right? And there's a whole thing there from Gary about insulin to carb ratios made easy. So he's got it all broken down. We're not going to dig all through it. We're going to tell you what it is. So I'm going to give it to you from my head, and then you'll give it to me from, you remember how we do this? And then you'll give it to me the right way. So insulin to carb ratio is just a measurement. It's how much insulin you need. 1 unit covers how many carbs. So Arden's carb ratio is what people would consider strong or aggressive, right? Mm-hmm. So her insulin to carb ratio right now is 1 unit for 5.5 carbs.
Okay.
Which I think people would think like, wow, that sounds like a lot. But it's the amount that we know she needs. And other people might be like, oh my God, I use 1 unit for every 20 carbs or 40. You might be a kid getting 1 unit for 100 carbs. I have no idea.
Yes.
But that's all a carb ratio is it's that measurement that you tell your pump when you're setting up your settings in your pump, or the amount you use when you're drawing up insulin in MDI. I don't know that there's another way to explain it, is there?
No, I didn't have to say very much. So I don't think people are going to absolutely be able to hear me say carb. I don't know.
I'm sorry. I'll lead you down another road so we get back to it. So,
but no, you described it very, very well. Essentially, you figure out how much 1 unit of insulin covers a certain amount of carbohydrate that you eat. And with some evaluation around your meals, you may find that a certain amount of insulin at a certain time of day covers a certain amount of carbohydrate a little differently.
Mm-hmm. And so like when you leave the doctor's office, they're going to just give you an insulin to carb ratio. They're going to say, here's where we're going to start with this. Now, Jenny and I have actually done an episode about that. It's episode 821. It's called The Math Behind Setting Insulin to Carb Ratio. It's a catchy title.
That was a while ago, wasn't it?
That was at the beginning of this year. Does it feel like a long time ago to you? It was 7 months ago.
It feels like it was a while ago.
Yeah,
yes.
We made it about 7 months ago. So, so there is an episode. It's about 20 minutes long, and it explains to you how to set your insulin to carb ratio, give you a good starting place. And it talks about the math, so you know how to do it yourself. But, what I'm being told by, Isabella is there are just a lot of people who just don't know what it means to begin with. So, yeah, so she just wanted to have a defining diabetes episode for it.
Well, and that's really interesting. I wonder how many of those people were diagnosed maybe with the questions that came in, how many were diagnosed maybe as an adult and were given a set amount of insulin to just take at a mealtime? Almost what's referred to as an old scale or an old sliding scale kind of concept of don't worry about how much you eat, just take 3 units of insulin with each mealtime. And that's what's going to cover it. And so maybe they've never really been moved into the concept of counting up how much you're eating and taking a certain amount of insulin to match what you want to eat rather than being told you just have to eat about the same amount all the time.
My mind jumps to, I wonder how many people's doctors keep cranking up their insulin to carb ratio as they get older or gain weight or something like that and don't reevaluate their basal, and how many people's insulin to carb ratios are probably wrong or more aggressive than they need to be if their basal was right. That's the thing that makes me wonder about it. Yeah. I think that this is I think diabetes is a good example of people want it to be set it and forget it. It's not. Your situations change. Arden's a great example. At college, there's one quality of food. At home, there's a different quality. She needs more insulin at college than she does at home. She needs more basal at college. Her carb ratio is stronger at college than it is at home. But that's happening to people all over the place. And doctors, generally speaking, ignore your basal. Like, I know it's not everybody, but a lot of people's basal does not get considered again. So as you start needing more insulin, I think they start putting it into your correction factor, and they start putting it into your carb ratio sometimes.
Yeah, I think the carb ratio is the one that's the heaviest in terms of first adjustment. Mm-hmm. I always actually consider the correction factor as like the forgotten, like, stepchild in the corner kind of thing. Like, I have some people that I end up working with initially. They're like, I don't know, what does that do? Or I don't know, that hasn't been changed since I started on a pump 15 years ago. And I'm like, it makes me kind of cringe that nothing's been evaluated.
No, so correction factor, 1 unit of insulin moves your blood sugar how far, right?
Correct.
When Arden was a few years into diabetes, I started thinking, like, I can't move these high blood sugars. Like, I couldn't figure out why. And nobody told me. Like, I had to dig through it. It was before I'm with Scott from the podcast. And like, so I was like looking through it, and I realized that Arden's correction factor was one moved. They had it set at 300. 1 unit moves her 300 points. Well, that was not even close to being true. And even back then, it was more like 1 to 100. Today it's like 1 to 43, maybe, you know?
Okay.
And so, but that's also things that we reassess. So you need to know what these things are so that you know what they do, so that you know that you need to look at them when you're having issues.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's a good point to make. As you said before, this isn't a set it, I figured it out, and okay, now I've got it for the rest of my life. It's not that way at all. You may have lifestyle change. You may have growth in your child or your teenager. You may have something significant that shifts for you as an adult. And so once you have it set and figured it out, once you start seeing it, something isn't working and I haven't changed any other variables, then you need to reassess, well, gosh, maybe my 1 unit per 10 grams of carb isn't working anymore. I'm now always low after lunchtime.
Yeah.
Reevaluate.
I just thought of something. It's never occurred to me before. I'm just going to say it here before we end. You buy a brand new car and they tell you it gets 30 miles to the gallon. And you drive it away. As you drive it away, you think, they told me to use premium fuel, but I don't want to spend all that money on that. I'm going to use regular. Now you're going to get less gas mileage. Then the air filter starts to get dirty, and you're going to get a little more lowering of your gas mileage. And then the tires start wearing unevenly, and your gas mileage lower. Literally, diabetes is the same exact thing. You know, like if you moved to an area that's at a different elevation, your car will get different gas mileage.
Yes.
If you move to a higher elevation place, you don't need as much insulin most of the time. Like, so there are all these little things. We call them variables when we're talking about them, but they're all these little unseen forces that change how much insulin you need.
Correct.
And they're everywhere, and you're not thinking about them. So reassessing your insulin to carb ratio and your other settings is really important. So
yes.
Okay. Well, there we go. Because I said to her, I'm like, you want us to describe what a carb ratio is? And she said, yeah. I'm like, I think that's going to be like a 45-second episode. Are you sure we need that? And she's like, you should see how many people don't know. We need somewhere to be able to send them. And I said, okay, fair enough. I'll make Jenny do it.
Awesome. I think that was, 10 minutes, 11 minutes.
Wasn't bad,
maybe.
right?
It wasn't bad. No.
Yeah, okay.
It was purposeful. So yay.
Yeah. Right in, right out. All right. Thanks.
Sure.
I might have ruined all your fun by telling Jenny she says carb. Thanks so much to Jennifer Smith. Hey, Jenny works at integrateddiabetes.com if you're interested in hiring her. I also want to thank Omnipod, makers of the Omnipod DASH and Omnipod 5, and remind you to head right now to my link, omnipod.com/juicebox. I can't say enough good things about Omnipod. I hope you go check it out. The entire Defining Diabetes series is in your podcast player. If you want to see a list of the episodes, go to juiceboxpodcast.com. Up top in the menu, click on Defining Diabetes, and there's a list. That same list is available in the featured tab of the private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. I hope you're following the Facebook groups. There's a private group with 40,000 members, great conversations all day long about diabetes, and there's a public page, Juicebox Podcast. Give them a follow. You're going to find them incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.